At my son's wedding, my daughter-in-law leaned close to me and whispered words that stopped my heart. She smiled like nothing was wrong, but her voice was cold when she said, "He should have married me first." For a second, I thought I misheard her. She was my son's new wife, the woman he loved. Why would she say something like that? I tried to brush it off, to enjoy the moment. But later that night, when I looked at the wedding photos, I saw something that made me freeze. Before I tell you what I found, let me take you back to where it all started. And if you love stories that make you feel something real, don't forget to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I always love hearing your stories too. My name is Laura Bennett, and for most of my life, I've only had one true purpose: to raise my son, Ethan. After my husband passed away when Ethan was 12, it was just the two of us. I worked long hours as a nurse, sometimes coming home too tired to cook, but Ethan never complained. He was the kind of boy who understood life was hard and still smiled through it. When he finally met a woman he wanted to marry, I thought all the struggles had been worth it. Her name was Vanessa Reed. From the very first day I met her, she seemed perfect, beautiful, polite, and thoughtful. She'd call me Mom before we were even family, and she often dropped by with flowers or home-baked cookies. She talked about how much she loved Ethan and how grateful she was to be joining our family. Every mother dreams of a daughter-in-law like that. I honestly believed Ethan had found the one person who would love him the way he deserved. The months leading up to the wedding were a blur of excitement. Ethan wanted a small ceremony, but Vanessa insisted on something grand: an outdoor wedding at a vineyard, with string lights, white roses, and live music. I thought it was a bit much for two people just starting out, but Ethan didn't seem to mind. He looked so happy. The day of the wedding was perfect. The weather was warm, the sky was clear, and every detail looked like something out of a magazine. I watched my son at the altar, tall and proud, wearing his father's old cufflinks. My heart swelled with pride. When Vanessa walked down the aisle in her lace gown, everyone gasped. She looked stunning, and Ethan's eyes filled with tears when he saw her. It was the kind of love every mother hopes her child will find. The ceremony went beautifully. They said their vows, kissed, and walked down the aisle hand in hand while everyone clapped and cheered. During the reception, we danced, laughed, and toasted to their future. I remember thinking, this is it. My boy finally has his happy ending. But that moment, the whisper, changed everything. After the ceremony, I went to hug Vanessa, wanting to welcome her once more as my daughter-in-law. She leaned in, her hand on my shoulder, and said quietly, "He should have married me first." I froze. Her tone wasn't playful or teasing. It was serious, almost bitter. I pulled back slightly, searching her face for a hint of a smile, but she just looked away, her expression calm, as if she hadn't said anything unusual. I laughed nervously, pretending it was just a weird joke. Maybe she was tired, maybe she meant something else. I didn't want to cause a scene, especially on such a beautiful day, so I smiled, hugged her again, and told myself to forget about it. That night, after I came home, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my bed and started scrolling through the pictures from the wedding. Everyone looked so joyful. Ethan laughing with his friends, Vanessa posing for the camera, me wiping tears during the vows. But when I looked closely, I noticed something that made me uneasy. In almost every photo, Vanessa wasn't looking at Ethan. Her eyes were fixed on something else, or maybe someone else. There was a strange sadness in her expression, like she was lost in a memory she couldn't escape. A chill ran through me. That whisper echoed in my mind again and again. He should have married me first. What could she possibly have meant by that? At first, I thought maybe she was joking about their relationship timeline, or how long it took him to propose. But deep down, I knew there was something else hiding behind those words. Something that didn't belong in a wedding filled with love and joy. I tried to shake off the feeling, but the more I looked at those photos, the heavier my chest felt. It was like the pictures were trying to tell me something I wasn't ready to see. And when I finally realized what was hidden in them, my entire world changed. For the next few days after the wedding, I couldn't stop thinking about that whisper. It echoed in my head whenever I looked at my son's smiling face in the photos. I tried to convince myself that I was being dramatic, that Vanessa had probably meant something innocent. But every time I looked at her picture, something about her expression made me uneasy. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. A week later, Ethan and Vanessa invited me over to their new apartment for dinner. I baked Ethan's favorite pie and told myself to stop worrying. When I arrived, everything looked perfect. Candles on the table, soft music playing, and Vanessa greeting me with her usual warmth. She kissed my cheek and said, "I hope you're finally getting used to having another woman in Ethan's life." She said it with a smile, but something about the way she said "another woman" made me pause. During dinner, I watched how she interacted with Ethan. She laughed at everything he said, but there was a strange tension between them. He seemed distracted, answering her questions without really looking at her. Once or twice, I caught him glancing at his phone when she wasn't watching. It wasn't the newlywed joy I expected. After dinner, Vanessa insisted on showing me their photo wall, a collage of pictures from their honeymoon, the wedding, and family moments. My eyes lingered on one of the photos from the ceremony. In it, Ethan was smiling down at Vanessa, but her gaze wasn't on him. She was looking at something, or someone, behind him. Her expression was soft, almost longing. "Beautiful picture, isn't it?" she said quietly, watching me. "Yes," I replied, trying to sound calm. "You both look very happy." She smiled, but her eyes didn't match her words. "We were," she said under her breath, so low I almost missed it. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I sat in my living room, flipping through old photo albums of Ethan's childhood. Then I came across a picture of my late husband, Mark. He was standing in his office, surrounded by his young employees. One woman caught my attention. She was standing beside him, her hand lightly resting on his shoulder. She was younger, with long, dark hair and the same bright eyes as Vanessa. My heart began to race. I turned the photo toward the light and looked closer. It couldn't be, I thought. It had to be someone else. But the resemblance was undeniable. It was Vanessa, years younger, but the same face. I remembered my husband mentioning a young intern named Vanessa who had started working under him near the end of his career. He used to say she was talented, ambitious, and very determined. I never met her then, but the name had stuck in my memory. My stomach tightened. Could my son's new wife be the same Vanessa who once worked for my husband? I wanted to believe it was just a coincidence, but deep down, something told me it wasn't. The next day, I couldn't resist my curiosity. I went to the storage room where I kept Mark's old office files and company photos. I opened one of the boxes labeled 2015 Staff Events. There it was again, another picture, this time clearer. My husband, smiling, surrounded by his team, and next to him stood Vanessa Reed. I sat down slowly, feeling my hands shake. The woman in those pictures had been in her early 20s back then. That was almost 8 years ago, which meant she would be around 26 now, the exact same age as my daughter-in-law. My heart ached. Had Vanessa known my husband before she met Ethan? And if so, why hadn't she ever mentioned it? Why would she keep something like that from my son, or from me? The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I became. That whisper at the wedding suddenly took on a whole new meaning. He should have married me first. What if she wasn't talking about Ethan at all? What if she meant Mark, my late husband? I tried to dismiss the thought, but I couldn't. I needed to know the truth. A few days later, I decided to visit Vanessa unannounced while Ethan was at work. She opened the door, looking surprised, but smiling politely. "Oh, Laura, what a nice surprise. Come in." I looked around the living room. It was filled with family photos. But one picture caught my attention. It was a framed portrait of my husband. It wasn't from the wedding display or from Ethan's childhood. It was an older photo, one that had never been in our house. I knew because I had taken that photo myself years ago in Mark's office. My voice trembled slightly. "Where did you get that picture?" She glanced at it quickly and smiled. "Ethan gave it to me. He said it was a nice memory, but I knew that wasn't true. Ethan never had that photo." It was one of the ones I'd kept in storage, hidden away with the office files. I forced a smile and nodded. It's a lovely picture. She didn't notice how tightly I was gripping my bag. When I got home that night, I felt sick. The puzzle pieces were slowly fitting together, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. The young intern who once worked for my husband, the whisper at the wedding, the strange sadness in her eyes. They were all connected. I didn't know what her intentions were or what kind of relationship she might have had with my husband, but one thing was clear. My son had no idea who he had really married. As I sat there staring at the old photograph, I realized I was facing a terrible choice. Do I tell Ethan the truth and risk breaking his heart? Or do I stay silent and protect him from something that could destroy our family forever? That night, I made up my mind. I couldn't live with secrets anymore. The next morning, I would start looking for proof, not for gossip, not for revenge, but for the truth my son deserved to know. The next morning, I woke up with one thought in my mind. I had to find the truth. For years, I had taught Ethan to face problems head on, to never live in half-truths. If I stayed silent now, I'd be betraying everything I'd ever told him. I started by calling the company where my husband once worked. The receptionist transferred me to the archives department. I explained that I was trying to locate an old employee named Vanessa Reed, who had worked under Mark Bennett years ago. The man on the phone hesitated, then said, "Yes, I remember that name. She interned here around 2015. She was one of Mr. Bennett's brightest trainees." My chest tightened. "Do you know if she kept in touch after he passed?" I asked. He paused before answering. "I'm not sure, ma'am, but she attended his memorial. She came alone and left quickly. I remember because she cried through the entire speech." I thanked him and hung up. My hands were shaking. So she had been there, silently standing among us while I'd been too lost in grief to notice. I drove straight to the photo studio that had covered Ethan's wedding. The photographer, a kind woman named Grace, welcomed me in. "Back so soon?" she asked cheerfully. "Are you ordering more prints?" "No," I said quietly. "I'd like to see all the photos from that day, every one of them." Grace seemed surprised, but opened her computer and scrolled through hundreds of pictures. At first, everything looked normal. Family portraits, dancing guests, the ceremony under soft lights. But then she stopped at one photo that made my stomach drop. It was taken during the toasts. In the background, behind Ethan, was a large framed photo of Mark and me from our wedding day, a memory Vanessa couldn't have known about. But in this photo, she was staring directly at that frame, her face unreadable. I asked Grace to print it. Then I asked to see any behind-the-scenes photos. She hesitated, but handed me a folder. "There are a few test shots my assistant took before the ceremony," she said. When I looked through them, my blood ran cold. In one image, Vanessa was standing alone near the altar before anyone else arrived. Her hand rested gently on the photo of Mark that had been placed on a memorial table. The look on her face wasn't sadness. It was something deeper, more personal, like she was saying goodbye. "Can I keep these?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "Of course," Grace said softly. "Is everything all right?" I forced a smile. "Just family memories." I left the studio with the photos clutched tightly in my hand. For a long time, I sat in my car, staring at them, feeling my heart twist. The truth I'd been afraid of was staring back at me. Vanessa hadn't just known my husband. She'd cared for him deeply, maybe even loved him. That evening, Ethan called. "Mom, you haven't been answering my text. Are you okay?" I hesitated. "Ethan, I need to see you. Alone." He came over the next morning. I showed him the old office photos and the new wedding prints. His eyes flicked between them, confusion turning into disbelief. "That can't be the same person," he said. But the longer he looked, the paler he became. "She never told me she knew Dad. She worked for him," I said softly. "And she was at his memorial." Ethan ran his hands through his hair, pacing the room. "Why would she hide that from me?" I didn't answer. Some truths have to be faced, not softened. After a long silence, he said, "I'll talk to her, tonight." But as soon as he left, I couldn't sit still. I needed to hear Vanessa's side first. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe my mind was running wild with grief and suspicion. So that evening, while Ethan was still at work, I drove to their apartment. When she opened the door, she looked startled. "Laura, is everything okay?" I stepped inside, holding the photos in my hand. We need to talk. She looked at the pictures and her face drained of color. Where did you get those? I found them, I said. You worked with my husband, didn't you? You knew him. For a moment, she said nothing. Then her eyes filled with tears. Yes, I knew him. Her voice broke. He was kind to me when no one else was. I was young, scared, trying to start my career. He helped me when my father was sick. I admired him, but he never crossed a line. I promise you that. Then why hide it? I asked quietly. Because I didn't want Ethan to think I married him because of his father. When we met, I didn't recognize him at first. But when I realized who he was, I panicked. I was afraid you'd hate me. I didn't know what to say. The anger inside me slowly gave way to something else. Sadness, exhaustion, confusion. Vanessa, I said, at the wedding, you whispered something to me. You said, he should have married me first. What did you mean? She covered her face, shaking. I meant your husband. I didn't mean to say it out loud. I was thinking about how much he shaped the man Ethan became. It was a stupid, emotional moment. I loved your husband for who he was, but I love Ethan for the man he became. Her honesty cut through me. I wanted to hate her, but I saw the pain in her eyes. A woman haunted by guilt she didn't know how to escape. I stood up slowly. You have to tell Ethan the truth before it destroys your marriage. Tears streamed down her face. I will, she said. I just didn't know how. That night, as I drove home, I knew that everything was about to change. The truth was out, but whether it would heal or destroy my family, that was something none of us could control. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. It was Ethan. His voice was tight and shaken. Mom? She told me everything, he said. Can I come over? When he arrived, his face looked pale and tired, like he hadn't slept all night. He sat at the kitchen table, his hands clenched together. She told me she knew Dad, he said quietly, that she worked for him years ago. She said she cared about him, but nothing ever happened. I don't know what to believe. I poured him some coffee, trying to keep my own emotions steady. Ethan, sometimes the truth doesn't come all at once. It's okay to be confused. He rubbed his face with both hands. She said she fell in love with him, that he reminded her of everything she admired in a man. And when she met me, she said it felt like life was giving her a second chance. What does that even mean, Mom? I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to protect him, but the truth was already out. It means she was living in the shadow of a memory, I said. She thought she could start over by recreating something that was never hers. He looked up at me, his eyes full of pain. Do you think she used me? I reached across the table and took his hand. I think she loved the idea of you before she really knew you. Whether that's love or not, that's for you to decide. He sat there in silence for a long time, staring at the coffee cup as if it could give him answers. Finally, he said, I'm going to talk to her again. I need to hear it from her one last time. That evening, he called her to meet at the park where they had taken their engagement photos. I didn't want to interfere, but a mother's heart never rests. I parked my car nearby, far enough to give them privacy but close enough to see. The wind was cold, the trees bare, and the sun was setting behind gray clouds. I watched Ethan approach her. She looked smaller than I remembered, fragile, almost. They sat on a bench facing the lake. Even from a distance, I could see the hurt in both their faces. They talked for a long time. Sometimes Ethan gestured angrily. Other times, he just sat still while she cried. Then something unexpected happened. Ethan stood up and reached into his pocket. He pulled out his wedding ring, looked at it for a moment, and then placed it gently on the bench beside her. He said something I couldn't hear, turned, and walked away. Vanessa buried her face in her hands. I didn't go to him right away. I let him have his silence. When he finally came home later that night, his voice was calm but heavy. It's over, he said simply. She said she never meant to hurt me. She said she thought she could move on from Dad's memory by loving me, but she couldn't. I nodded slowly. Sometimes people confuse healing with replacement, I said. She wasn't evil, Ethan, just lost. He sat down beside me and whispered, I keep thinking about how Dad would have handled this. He would have told me to forgive, wouldn't he? I smiled faintly. Your father always believed forgiveness was for your own peace, not for anyone else's. For a long time, we just sat there in silence, listening to the clock tick. It reminded me of the day after Mark's funeral, quiet, endless, but filled with unspoken love. The next few days were difficult. Vanessa packed her things and moved out of their apartment. She sent me a letter before she left. It said, "I never meant for any of this to happen. I loved Ethan, but I see now that my heart was never free to love him the way he deserved. Please tell him I'm sorry." I folded the letter and placed it in a box with the wedding photos. Some truths aren't meant to be erased, only understood. Months passed before Ethan began to smile again. He focused on his work, spent more time visiting me, and even took up hiking again, something he used to do with his father. One afternoon, while we were cleaning the garage, he looked at me and said, "Mom, I don't hate her anymore. I think she was just trying to hold on to something she thought she lost." I nodded, proud of his strength. "You grew up today," I said softly. That night, I took out the last wedding picture I had kept. It was of Ethan and Vanessa standing beneath the vines, the light of the setting sun glowing behind them. For all the pain that followed, that photo still showed something real, a moment where two people believed in love, even if it wasn't the kind that lasts. I placed the picture back in the box, closed it, and whispered, "Rest now, Mark. Your son is okay." The story of that whisper at the wedding had finally reached its end. It started as confusion and heartbreak, but became something else. A lesson about how the past can quietly shape the future if we don't make peace with it. Sometimes, people enter our lives not to stay, but to remind us what still needs healing. Vanessa's presence reopened an old wound, but in doing so, it allowed both Ethan and me to let go of ghosts we didn't know we were still carrying. Love can twist, fade, or even come from the wrong place, but it always teaches us something. For us, it taught forgiveness. The months after Ethan's separation from Vanessa passed slowly, like the calm after a storm. The silence in his life was heavy at first, but it carried a strange kind of peace. The constant tension, the quiet doubts, the uneasy smiles, all of it was gone. What remained was the ache of loss and the need to rebuild. He moved back home for a while. Every morning, I'd hear him making coffee in the kitchen, the same way his father used to. He rarely spoke about Vanessa, and I didn't push him to. Some wounds need quiet before they can heal. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch together in silence, just listening to the sound of birds or the distant traffic. I could tell he was learning to breathe again, one day at a time. For me, the truth about Vanessa stayed like a shadow. I didn't hate her, not anymore. Hate had no room in my heart after everything that had happened. I thought often about what she had said that night, about how she fell in love with Mark, but found Ethan instead. There was something both tragic and human in that. Love can do strange things to people. It can make them reach for comfort in the wrong places, or mistake memory for destiny. I found myself praying for her sometimes. Wherever she went, I hoped she found peace, because carrying guilt that deep can destroy a person. She had made choices that hurt others, yes, but she had also carried pain long before she met us. Ethan started to rebuild his life. He changed jobs, joined a hiking club, and made new friends. Slowly, I saw color return to his face. One evening, while we were making dinner, he said quietly, "You know, Mom, I think Vanessa really did love Dad." I didn't respond right away. He continued, "Not in the way she should have, but maybe she loved the kindness she saw in him. Maybe she saw a piece of that in me." I nodded. "Maybe that's true," I said. "But you're your own man, Ethan. Don't live in anyone's shadow, not mine, not your father's, and not hers." He smiled, and for the first time in months, it was a real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes. A year passed. Life found a new rhythm. The house felt warmer, lighter. Ethan began dating again, this time a woman named Lydia. She was kind, grounded, and funny in a quiet way. When he introduced her to me, she didn't bring flowers or gifts. She brought a simple homemade pie and said, "I hope you like this. It's my grandmother's recipe." That small act, so genuine and uncalculated, told me more about her character than anything else could. Watching Ethan with her was different. He wasn't trying to prove anything, and she wasn't trying to be perfect. They laughed together easily, shared small glances full of understanding. It was love without ghosts. One afternoon, as I cleaned the attic, I found the box of wedding photos again. My first instinct was to throw them away, but something stopped me. I sat down and flipped through them one last time. I looked at Vanessa's face, her distant eyes, and then at Ethan, full of hope and love. There was pain in those pictures, yes, but there was also truth. That chapter of our lives had shaped us, forced us to face things we'd buried for years. I placed the photos back in the box and wrote on the lid with a marker, "For the days that taught us who we are." Then I closed it and put it away for good. That night, I dreamed of Mark for the first time in years. He was standing on a hill at sunset, smiling the same warm smile he always had. When I woke up, I felt lighter, as if a weight had finally lifted from my heart. I like to believe it was his way of saying, "It's all right now. You did what needed to be done." In the months that followed, Ethan proposed to Lydia. Their wedding was small, simple, and full of laughter. When I watched them exchange vows, I didn't feel fear this time. I felt peace. There were no secrets, no shadows, just two people beginning a life built on honesty. After the ceremony, Ethan came over and hugged me. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered, "for not giving up on me, for showing me what real love looks like." I held him tightly. "You found it yourself, son. You just needed to walk through the hard parts to see it." Later that night, I sat outside under the stars and thought about everything we'd been through. Life has a way of teaching us through heartbreak. Some lessons come gently, others tear us apart before they rebuild us. But in the end, what stays is the understanding that truth, no matter how painful, always leads to freedom. Vanessa had been a chapter, not a villain. She was the storm that forced us to confront what was broken. And once the storm passed, we found clarity. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that love should never come from a place of replacement or regret. It should come from knowing who you are and choosing to share that honestly. So, if you're watching this, remember, some truths hurt before they heal, but they always bring light. Don't run from the past. Learn from it, forgive it, and let it go. And if this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe for more true, emotional stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love hearing your thoughts, and your stories always remind me that we're never alone in the things we go through.